Perfect. Alrighty, folks, thank you all for being here. Just to introduce myself, my name is Cindy Chavez Swenson. My pronouns are she, her, am. I am the CEO and founder of R.O.S.C.A Money Circle. And one of the things that I want to start off with is just to kind of clarify that I didn't invent something new. I think with a lot of tech, it's some completely new idea, or at least from what I've seen. What I did is literally take something that I grew up with, what I knew, and I modernized it. So the theme on tech meets tradition at Latina Reimagining, Tandas for financial equity is truly my calling, but also what I did to kind of create something literally from nothing with something that I already know. So just to start off, let me go ahead and make sure that everyone's on. Thank you all for being here. So one of the things, our driving force for yesterday's traditions, today's technology, is that in the next 5 years, I plan, and my team and I plan to be the JP Morgan of the Latino community. And I know that's a bit ambitious, but one of the things that I've learned throughout this journey is not to fear success. There's a lot of, especially in the tech world, a lot of people telling us how to do things. But as a Latina founder who literally created this company with my teaching salary, some investments that I had, and really just strategizing ways that I can create something that can be long-term. So the focus is in our community to lend, borrow, and thrive. And what I really focused on was really thinking about tandas, cundinas. Some people know them as cuchubales, juntas, susus. If you're not familiar with what tandas are, they're a type of R.O.S.C.A, hence the name, outside of the banking system. So it's microfinancing as a community without connecting directly within a bank. Now, to give you some background information, it says here that I had no business building a startup. That can go back to my mindset of not seeing myself in these tech spaces. I've had, I was a child of immigrants, plus my career in academia, where I've mainly been taught to stay in my own lane, and maybe not directly, but I've also been afraid initially to speak my mind. Now, as I've grown into who I am outside of my role as an educator, outside of my comfort zone, I've realized that the tech world is just like being in academia. There's very clear mindsets that are in place. I saw an opportunity when I was at a tech conference to build, but I also was told it's too hard, it's too expensive, you need a lot of outside funding, which I did not have. I think the mindset that I came into with this, it's like parenting. Those of us who are parents, if we knew how hard it was, we probably wouldn't do it. That's the same mindset I had with building this company. Is as I started building it, I realized there's a lot of behind the scenes and information that I didn't know. But I've taken a lot of what I'm already familiar with in my community, is that I can learn it. I think that's the one thing that I realized in this journey, is that anything that we do, we genuinely can learn and grow from it. So maybe not initially. So a term sheet, I had no idea what a term sheet was. And one thing I've done as a researcher is figure it out. I've created a community of other people who are extremely supportive of who I am and what I'm doing. I realized that I use my own family. My father was a business person, started his business as a landscaper and a gardener in the 70s. And again, a mindset of he didn't have anything and he was able to create a lifelong career. And I use him as a guide in his experiences. So then for me, as I go into this journey, I connected it back to my community. So many people ask about the name R.O.S.C.A versus Rosca de Reyes. So the word tanda was actually my initial trademark, and I've trademarked 3 different names. And again, this is part of you pivot. So we started off with the word tanda. Somebody else had trademarked it. I couldn't afford to go after them. So then I ended up going with Cundina. Somebody had a business that had already been trademarked under Cundina, but that even though that business was no longer in existence, my banking or my business attorney said technically they still own the trademark. So as we were branding, as we were getting our copy, there's just so many, like, we can't decide on what that is until we have the name set. So I decided to think about rotating savings accounts and what that is, but then I paired it with Rosca de Reyes. So if you're not familiar with the bread, it's also referred to as the Three Kings. It's an ornate circular bread, what you see here. And it's actually in reference to the three wise men. So this is usually something that we do around January 6th, and every family does it or doesn't do it, but it's kind of the January 6th, 12 days after the holidays, it goes into January 6th. And what you do with this is everybody cups a slice, and if you get baby Jesus, again, this is going back to the mindset of like the three wise men, you have to host a party by February 2nd. It kind of reminds me of a Llorona. Everybody does it differently, but it inspired me of our trademark. And actually going back to what Tandas and money circles are, circles, they're community, they're together. And the circular shape of the Rosca de Reyes is actually our image, our logo. Again, going back to what I know, and then having faith that whatever I do is going to work out. Yes, maybe I have to pivot. Yes, I have to change. But one of the things is that you have to believe in yourself in order for it to be successful. I realized when I got a lot of doors shut that if I didn't invest in myself, when VC capitalists told me, they kept saying, you're too early, you're too early. I got grants denied. If I just relied on them wholeheartedly, I wouldn't even be here right now. So one of the things that I realized is that in order for me to be successful, I have to believe that I'm going to be successful. I have to see myself in these spaces. One of the books that I read in the initial start, again, going back to, I'm an educator first. And what I realized is I needed to learn a lot about this world. And one of the books that I started off with is How to Fuck Up Your Startup. And I use this book. It's interesting because I started about 2 years ago and I slowly go through the chapters, because what I do is I use the book as a guide. Every chapter is based on where I'm at right now, whether it's building a team, whether it's the MVP stage. We're dealing right now with iOS. How do I constantly pivot and learn as I grow? So as I mentioned before, if you don't know what money circles are, we have them in our community, but it's not just a Latino community. A lot of immigrants and communities of color have money circles because we come from the we culture mindset that together we could build things. Now, the way it works, and this is just the way that I was familiar with, everybody does it differently, is that Tanda is really one of the most commonly followed informal associations in Mexico, with 31% of the population actively participating in one. So what you start off with is, say, on average, 10 friends or family members, all friends that you trust. Social currency is extremely important in our community. We value that more than credit. We value having trust within our family members is extremely important. And I always say, you never want to be that one person that doesn't pay their tandas. Like, that is like the worst taboo thing you can do, is not follow through. And so tandas are between 10 friends, and each one of those friends, you give $100. And every 2 weeks, everybody gives $100 to a group's organizer. At the end of the month, one participant gets the pot, which is, say we start off with 2,000, and this continues where everybody gets the pot. Now, if you're not familiar with these, it seems really like scary. Oh my gosh, what, can somebody run off with them? And while there's been longitudinal research on this showing that it's actually very rare for people to run off, it has happened. But one of the things is, because you are part of a community, the social currency is extremely valuable. And if you do run off, I always say this, like, you do not want to be found. If you run off with people's money, make sure it's far, far away, because everyone is part of the circle. Everyone's trusting you. And it's really personal. Everyone sets up their circles differently. But the way it works is really the power of social currency when traditional banking shut its doors. And again, those of us who've experienced that directly, I always think about my emerging adulthood when I was in my 20s and I had overdraft fees, when I had all these, I didn't know how to figure out the banking system. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know that if you had no money, they still take money. Like, there's a lot of things that, especially as a first gen, a child of immigrants, that was foreign to me and was not taught. But money circles and tandas cundinas were very clear. They were something that I realized were successful. And if you needed an opportunity, so say you needed one for $5,000, my mom would always say, okay, let's get ready. If you want one for $5,000, let's set the plan. And you do, you organize it. So why I even started this? Well, there's a demographic that's not being served, and that's us, the Latino community within the banking system. We have a massive purchasing power in the US. We have these amazing opportunities that aren't necessarily brought up to us. And one of the things we don't recognize is amongst the 10 largest GDPs in the world, the US Latino GDP grew the second fastest rate in the US in 2020 and 2021. China's is the only one that grew faster. In Latinos in the US, we're an independent country. Their GDP would be the world's 5th largest, outpacing even the UK, France, and Italy. And speaking about our purchasing power, Latinos in the US had an economic output surpassing $3.2 trillion. So our purchasing power in the US is massive. And yet at the same time, when I look at these tech companies, I've seen a lot of money circle-like companies, but none of them really focused on tailoring it to the community that knows them. And for me, it was extremely important to keep my family in mind, keep people in mind as we're creating our app. The way I saw it was, can my mom figure this out? My mom's 73. She is not completely against technology. She's pretty savvy when it comes to technology. So I kept saying, can she figure this out? Can she download the app? Can she, use the different ways of inviting people to her money circle? And as we were designing that, that was really the main focus. So the financial justice behind this. Traditional tandas actually offer significant benefits to communities often excluded from mainstream banking. Believe it or not, just participating in a tanda regularly improves saving habits for 69% of the participants, which it helps 65% avoid high interest loans. Going back to tandas, we think about communities, disenfranchised communities in the US. And when you look at the pockets of these communities, they always have like predatory systems like check cashing places, fast loans, very dangerous habits where it can actually cost them more money to participate in. And most of the time, if you look at these different disenfranchised communities, you notice that the banks aren't over there, traditional banks. So if they need access to funds, they don't see a bank there. They're going to go to the one that says it. And that's not everybody. But this is where the distrust to the banking system follows. Tandas build social capital, increasing trust among members by 25%. And they actually facilitate intergenerational financial education, with 72% of Latino families passing down financial values through such practices. We as first-gen students, so I'm in my class right now, so I said first-gen students. We as first generation, we end up actually having the financial habits from 3 generations ago. So if we had a bad experience with, say, the stock market, that gets passed down. And again, because we are we cultures, we believe it. We're like, so-and-so they lost all their money in the stock market. And it could just be one person. But because we had that experience, our money wounds are still healing. And we're probably in the process of healing that. And so the fear of losing that little bit of money that we worked really hard for is very scary. What I'm doing, what my team and I are doing with R.O.S.C.A is that we help with geographical constraints. Believe it or not, what's being used right now is WhatsApp. People are communicating about their tandas through WhatsApp. They have them through all parts of the world, and they have them with family members outside of the US. Communities with active tandas are 40% more likely to withstand economic downturns with resorting to predatory lending. So moreover, 58% of long-term participants report improved access to formal financial services. So R.O.S.C.A itself is taking yesterday's traditions and connecting it to today's technology. So my goal, and I always say about innovation, it's the 3 Bs. You break something that's already there, you blend it with something that already exists, or you bend the rules. And so for me, it's about looking at what's already there and reimagining it. And that's really all I did. When we look at, the solution is a couple things. It's right now going back to trust. That is the theme of our company, is trust. We got to get folks to look at R.O.S.C.A and trust it. They look at it and it's not just taking money. Actually, when I was introducing this to my aunt, she was like, I said, yeah, but we're not charging people. And she thought, but that's what they all say. So you see how experiences of people taking our money, systems been taking our money, overcharging us, those are deep and they follow us for a long time. And she's right. There's been so many promises out there by, not taking our money. And then because we are such a driving force, a working force in the US, the money that we do have was from sweat equity, from something. It wasn't generational wealth that was passed down. And the thought of losing it just puts us back in that mindset of like, now I have to go back and work this and work that and do that. The other thing is that by combining the lending circles of our ancestors with our current tech, security, and accessibility, we're taking our financial freedom into our own hands. So the app at the moment isn't moving money. How it works, and we're in the beta stage, we are currently setting it up so people organize their tandas. My mom, what she would do with her tandas were on a piece of paper. Usually it was like an old bill envelope, and she would say like who's doing it, what, and how, and that's how she would organize her tandas. And so with the technology, we're able to have it very simple and basic. You have all the people in your tanda. You have everybody getting a notification of when it's due, and then you plan. There's a chat feature in there where you're going to meet, who's going to get it. And there's always like a leader. My mom seemed to be the main leader of these tandas. And it's interesting because there's they trust her. They trusted with their money. And she would honestly have the money like hidden in the drawer somewhere. It was a beautiful thing to witness as a child because it was about helping each other. But that was a spark that ignited my imagination. What we do, and again, folks, this is just kind of going over the simplicity of our app, the basic desire to help our community, the need that's there, and that really we're able to do it. We're just modernize it. Our app is in English and Spanish. Everything we do is our blog is out today. So if you're interested, go out to our website, but everything I do is English and Spanish. Obviously we will, as we grow, we'll advance into other languages. But initially when I started this, that was my primary focus, is that, again, thinking of my family and what my family needed, it had to be in both languages. What makes us unique? I always say this, it's 100% Latina-owned, Latina created, and Latina focused. So my goal is, it's not excluding groups of people. Anyone can use the app. But when I went into these tech spaces, when I went into these fintech spaces, I saw everything that wasn't me. I saw people creating these massive, companies with money circles, but not focusing on supporting the community that really uses them. There's a lot of companies out there, and while they have their own mission and focus, my mission is to be Latino focused. We don't have predatory financial fees. There's no charges, interest. The app is 100% free. So when somebody downloads it, there's no hidden charges like, oh, to advance to this. Again, what I'm trying to do and what my team and I were doing is to model the in-person old ways of doing it using technology. So I mentioned briefly our community. This is just data from 2022. We're at 63.7 million. 2024, the Latino community in the US is at 67 million. Okay, so here's a whole demographic of people using Tandas. So if you think about it, 31% of 67 million is about 20 million. And yet a lot of the apps that are out there aren't necessarily, and I'm not saying that none of them are, but the ones I've seen and I've done research are not simply focused on the Latino community, because again, there's that mindset that there's no money there, or they don't have access or resources. But realistically, if people start looking at the data, Latinos in general are adopting fintech than any other group. In the US, Hispanic people use technology at the highest rate, 92% compared to other consumers. We also realize that the Latino community in the US is 66% of the workforce in the US. And no, we are not taking people's jobs. Let's clarify that. I don't know who wants to be a college professor, but I definitely was not taking someone's job. But we're the rising middle class. So because we are in the workforce, on average, each person having 2 or more streams of income. There's a quote that I used in my newsletter this week, and it focused on the African proverb of, you can't go into a river to see how deep it is with both feet. And that's really what I did. When I started this company, I used this. I had my stream as an educator that I used. That was my bread and butter. That's what was ever leveraging the company. And I always say I didn't need a lot. Okay. I had the mindset that I needed a lot to be successful, but I used what I had. I used women and organizations of businesses of color where women and other people were starting their business. So my copy editor, my brand voice, my brand, website designer, my marketing team, we all were people trying to create something with what we're passionate about, but we were creating it together. If we look at our market growth, so in general, we start looking at unbanked and underbanked Latinos in the US, 21% of folks said that they indicated not having enough money to meet the minimum balance requirements. So give you an example, I won't tell you what bank this was at, but when I was opening up my business account, one of the things is I had to have $500 minimum so I wouldn't be charged. That's an example of not being able to meet. If you need those $500, that's a lot to have there monthly, if you need it for something else. 13.2% cited distrust in banks. Again, if you don't understand, if people haven't told you that you need to have at least $500, and say you did understand, but you didn't get the logistics of it, and there was an emergency and you had to take those $500 off, now they're taking more money. And again, I'm thinking of my 20-year-old self when I had a bank account for the first time, and all of a sudden they're taking more money because I didn't have money. It didn't make sense to me. Those are things that create distrust in the banking system. And then 6% cited bank account fees. Okay, so here we're talking about a demographic that has the resources, that has a purchasing power, that has the work environment, the work ethic, and several streams of income. But because of the predatory fees, the hidden cost, the language, the financial language that many of us aren't exposed to early on, especially if our families weren't in this financial world. These are the things that keep us from going into these spaces. And maybe not entirely, but sometimes when it's talking about underbanked, is using the bank minimally, using the banking system to just pay bills. For example, Verizon, you have to have a bank account. Well, people have enough to pay the Verizon bill. But again, not putting everything in there is a norm because of the fears that come with the banking system. I had all of this in mind. As I was creating the company, it wasn't just about modernizing the Tandas. It was about looking at why the Tandas are successful. I started looking at the opportunity that was there for us to grow with it, and then creating a way where people would listen to me. Yes, I've had banks say no. I've had meetings where they're like, yeah, I've heard it all at this point we're going into our year 2. But one of the things is that our target demographic are primarily women. Females, 72% use Tandas. That's not excluding men, because we see a rise in men and males using Tandas more now. The average age is 18 to 55, while the older generation tends to be the one that has the experience creating them. We're also teaching the younger generations, because remember that financial habits are from 3 generations ago. So this is actually the demographic that we're focusing on. And we're primarily in the US, but we have the ability to use the app out in Mexico and Latin America. Those were main things that I wanted to use because of the scaling that I want to do. So I'm not just thinking initially about here in the US, I was thinking globally. I also thought about just the financial system in the US. So in the US, including the Latino community, 63 million people are underbanked or unbanked. And when we start looking at this, there's just a hidden fees that the banking system has that people, we don't want to give our money away anymore. We work so hard for it. And this isn't just one demographic. This is a lot of people. So when we go into and this goes back to the market potential, I mentioned this already, is that we are using Tandas more than any other group. I also wanted to give you an insight. So as I started this, again, I always say I'm at $0 billion. My goal isn't to become a unicorn. That's not my mindset, a $10 billion company. I just want to be a donkey. At this point, I just want to move, but I also don't want to fear success. When I look at other companies and I see them, I went to one conference and somebody said to me, that's very culturally specific. And I said, yes, it is. What I do right now is what my team and I are looking at is the 5-year plan. Phase 1 is where we're at, the social app. It's in beta stage. Eventually, we like to get a bank partnership. Then as we get into phase 3, go into banking services, eventually become transnational and global. So that's an ambitious goal, but I refuse to fear success. So everybody, thank you all for being here with me today. Again, my name is Cindy Chavez Swenson. Here's my email address. If you want more information about us, we're at R.O.S.C.A.moneycircle.com. Please join us if you're interested, or just reach out to me if you have any questions. So folks, let me know. I'm going to be in the chat. Thank you all for being here. And I think our chat is opened, but we'll see. And if you have questions, folks, go ahead and send me an email. I don't see the chat feature here, but I'll be available to answer anything. I can't find the chat, but I think if you have questions on contacting me, here's my information. And then how it works is also available on our website. So if folks want to stop by, they could see that there. Android is available, but we're working on iOS soon.
Cool. There is a couple questions, and I know you can't see the chat, so that's why I'm just jumping on just to kind of read them.
Thank you.
No problem. So William said, I've never participated in a tanda. What is the benefit of receiving the lump sum when it's your turn to receive the pot?
Can you rephrase that? Like, what's the benefit of receiving the lump sum?
Yeah. Like when it's your turn, pretty much.
Okay. So the main thing is, say, for example, it's used as a way to pay off any fees or any costs that you have. So instead of crowdfunding, which is one specific person, tandas itself are for everybody. So this is actually why they're legal, because I think there's also the mindset that tandas are illegal, but they're not. They're part of mutual aid because everyone gets the same amount. The only time tandas are illegal, and really it's for you, when you participate in a tanda, it's because you have said, hey, I don't need $2,000 right now, but I may need it later. So then you come in and you get the $2,000 and you can use it for whatever it is that you needed. But financially, it's not illegal to participate in a tanda because you're not collecting interest. That's the only time that there's a banking compliance issues. You're also not asking people for a fee. You're also not using it as a business. So like continuously do them. It's usually you get flagged for like $10,000 in your bank. So at a time, and then it's IRS, I think it's $15,000. So hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, I thought I saw it. Someone did ask a question. Hold on one second. Okay. What has been the most important aspects to establishing trust from customers?
I think for me, it's being the face of it. I have a hard time. I always say I have no intentions of being famous at all. But I realize that in order for the community to trust that I'm not some big bank coming in, that I'm not JP Morgan. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm like not even close, but I want them to know that this is who I am. I used my own money. So also keeping in mind that if I want people to trust, I'm not going to be out there and saying, I didn't use my own money to invest in this, but I want you to use it. I literally used my savings. My family and I created this together with our own income. And for me, that's the main driving force, is folks to know that this was a driving force for me on a personal level. But then hopefully as I talk to people, they realize that it's not somebody just trying to, create the next unicorn. And again, I'm not against being a unicorn in the tech world, but I definitely that's not my driving force. My driving force is to create an opportunity of access and resources, and also to see that if you wanted to create a tech company, you really, it's about strategy. And I hear numbers all the time, like 25 million to start. I'm looking at people like, really? I had a laptop, like that's the main thing. So hopefully that answers the question too.
Awesome. Let me just double check and make sure. A couple questions just flowed in, and I know we're at time for this session, but if you do have time to stick around,
sure.
Awesome. Do you know if for your app you're thinking about the tax implications for the Tanda organizer? I think if people transfer money via Zelle, the organizer has to report that income. I'm not super well versed, but I know for Venmo last year, they were supposed to report transactions bigger than $700.
Yeah, and I think that's a Venmo specific one. Again, this is just superficial knowledge from what I know right now based off the tandas. That I recommend everybody talking to their financial person if they have one. But legally, because it has come up a lot where people tell me like tandas are illegal, and I said they're actually not. So I have a banking compliance attorney that I work with, and the main thing is depositing $10,000 into your bank flags. So every bank has to report every deposit that's 10,000 plus. So that's a big flag. So that gets reported. So IRS may contact you with that. So if you continuously have $10,000 deposits, that will be a flag. And this is where auditing comes in. The other one is $15,000 gift. You can only do $15,000 gifts. And then if IRS, and again, I'm giving you like the cliff notes of that with Zelle and transfers. So for example, if you do a tanda and it's over, so say it's $100 each time, that's what gets reported. So it's not transactional of 700 at a time. In our blog, which again, next week's blog on Tuesday will be about our tandas legal, and it goes into the financial implications with Zelle, and not so much Zelle specifically because I don't name anybody, but with like the banking system. And keep in mind, again, I'm the type that being an educator, I had to do my work and understanding it. It changes every day, to be honest, but really recognizing the financial implication of the community if this is something that's out there. But yeah, there's a lot of the legal side of it, but there's also dangers where people are, I've seen and heard where people are charging interest. The other time that it's illegal is if you take people's money and not, and this is where there's record keeping in our app of who's participating and when.
Awesome. Okay. I think, let me just make sure. Curious to know how much you have seen Tandas generate per period, and where have you heard the money being used for?
I'll tell you, family-wise, like when my family used it for emergencies, it was oftentimes like a tire, they needed car repairments, expensive car repairments, medical bills. It's, you know, things like that that may seem like obsolete to some folks, especially folks who come from wealth and opportunities who aren't first gen or who aren't immigrants in the US. But emergencies are the main ones. We have bodas, like events, like people are like trying to save for, like, oh, a graduation parties. Those are the times where people create tandas, is that there's some big expense coming up and we're creating a money circle to help with that.
There was a question about your, if you could just repeat the, what platforms your service is available on again, and if it's accessible via browser or is using the Android app or iOS later required.
Yeah, so we're working on a launch. iOS is almost ready. And those of us who've dealt with iOS, keep in mind, I'm coming in as an English professor, a writing professor, like, this is a whole new world for me. But one thing I've learned in my career is that you can learn anything. iOS has hit a lot of hiccups. It's semantics. It's like language. It's like we had to change the language for certain things. We don't want to be deceiving, unintentionally deceiving, like it's a lending circle, because technically that is, but then people may have the assumption that it's a lending circle within the app. So iOS will hopefully be available soon. If you follow us on our socials, you'll see we're going to have a huge launch event. We will also have, notifications. We're going through our marketing strategy. We were hoping to have it ready before October 15th, but that's pretty soon. So we're working on that. So follow us on our socials. Go to R.O.S.C.A Money Circle, and there you can find our information. And then we'll be sending out our launch event and projects and everything else that comes with iOS. The Android is available. We're just not using it as much.
Awesome. Amazing, Cindy. You have been marvelous, and I appreciate this conversation. And there are no more questions in the chat, but everyone has Cindy's contact information, so feel free to message her about any other questions you may have. And again, thank you, Cindy, so much for doing this. We appreciate you. We'll be in touch, okay?
We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.